should Democrats trade the southern border for Ukraine? The question of the day. I've posted over at HartmannReport.com, and I also cross-posted it this morning over on dailycoz.com. And here's the deal. You had, Trump in New Hampshire this weekend, again quoting Hitler, again praising Putin and Kim Jong-un, and basically declaring his intention to become a dictator, America's first dictator. And, what's so bizarre about this is that the more he proclaims his embrace of foreign dictators, most recently he congratulated Milei, the guy who, Louise and I were in Argentina the day of the elections just a couple weeks ago. And we were in Buenos Aires that day, and, both days, the day before and the day after. And Milei, says he's going to do all these radical changes. The country's got real problems. Well, immediately he devalued the peso and began the process of laying off people in the unionized public sector, and they want to protest. So what did Milei do? He said, we're going to militarize the army, and the army's going to come out, and if you show up at a protest, we can shoot at you. So Milei instantly becomes a dictator, and Trump sends him congratulations. So we know the direction that this is going. Now, Trump is tight with Putin, and Putin has told Trump, cut off U.S. aid to Ukraine. And so then Trump goes to the Republicans and says, you must cut off U.S. aid to Ukraine, because, of course, Putin told. And the Republicans are like, yes, sir, please, don't hit me again, sir. They're terrified that Trump is going to send a primary challenger against them. Even if it's a primary challenger who's a wackadoodle who's going to lose and that seat's going to end up with a Democrat, they're not going to hold that seat. And for Republicans, nothing is more important than personal power and wealth, self-aggrandizement. So here you've got this Ukraine and Israeli aid package, and up until very recently, the Israeli aid package was also quite popular, and I think still is, at least among Republicans. And the Ukraine aid, of course. And the Republicans, thinking that they can blow up Ukraine aid and do what Trump wants, have said, yeah, sure, we'll consider the Ukraine aid as part of a package that includes dealing with our southern border. We want the Biden administration to seal the border, stop accepting immigrants, declare an emergency, whatever you have to do, use Trump-era policies, whatever. We just, shut that sucker down, and we will give you Ukraine and Israel. Now, first of all, let's just be clear about what's going on our southern border. No Democrat has ever suggested that the southern border should be wide open. Our first immigration law was passed in 1921, outside of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1886, which is its own completely separate story, but it didn't last. So 1921, we got the first Immigration Act, and it limited immigration in the United States to white people, essentially. It said that people who were not white could come into the United States, but only in proportion to the non-white population of the United States. And so in 1960, you had about 13, as I recall, 14% of immigrants into the United States were non-white, and everybody else was white people. I may be a little off on that number. It's in my article. I'm not scrolled to that spot, but you can find it. But that changed by 1965 because, we changed the law in 65. So by the 1980s, you were seeing, 80, 85% non-white immigration into the United States. And a lot of that brown people coming from Mexico or through Mexico. Every time there's a Democrat in the White House, Republicans make an issue out of it. That Democrat in the White House is letting brown people in. And until Trump, every Republican just kind of didn't do anything about it because it was working out well for them. Trump actually shut down the border to a large extent. Although it was done in the middle of the COVID crisis, and that was largely the excuse. But, bottom line, there is no open border. I mean, there are leaks, obviously, but there's no open border, and nobody has ever proclaimed it. But Republicans have been promoting this meme that Democrats want an open border forever. Ted Cruz. These are just headlines from articles about these people. Ted Cruz, quote, Biden open border policy is a craven political decision. Rick Scott, Americans don't want Biden's open borders. Marco Rubio, there's nothing compassionate about Biden's open border policies. Rand Paul, He's so extreme, he says Senator Rubio is the one for the open border. Josh Hawley, Biden's open border policies create a moral crisis. Senator Tom Cotton insists the border is wide open. Ron Johnson wants the world to know our national security is a risk because Democrats have turned border security into a partisan issue. Marjorie Taylor Greene blasts open border hypocrite Democrats. Mo Brooks, socialist Democrats open border policy. It goes on. I could give you another 15 or 20. Just Google open border in quotes and senator, congressman, or congresswoman and or representative, and you will get literally hundreds of quotes from Republicans saying that the border is open. Now, what happens? The coyotes down in Central and South America, the people who are actually business people making a living transporting immigrants and refugees to the U.S. border, they take these articles by these Republicans claiming that our border is wide open. They reprint them, translate them into Spanish, show the original, and pass them out to people as a way of recruiting people to give them their life savings to get them into the United States. So Republicans are driving the border crisis and have been for 20 years. So anyhow, now Democrats are based on an intentional Republican lie, by the way. So now Democrats, and the hypocrisy is obvious. I mean, if the Republicans were serious about doing anything about immigration, the first thing they would do is what I encountered when I lived in Germany and when I worked in Australia. In both cases, I had to go to the federal government and get a work permit. And it wasn't me who was actually applying for the permit and doing the whole song and dance, although I had to fill out a bunch of forms. It was my employer in both cases. Why? Because employers in Germany and Australia can go to jail if they hire people who... This is pretty much how it works in every other country. And, if Republicans were really concerned about illegal immigration in the United States, at least economic immigration, we're going to take your job kind of immigration, they would do the same thing. They'd have an E-Verify system that was actually rigorously enforced. But they refuse to do it because they like this issue. So here's the deal. Republicans are now saying, we'll give you Ukraine and Israel. You give us the border. I'm saying Joe Biden should take the deal. And, whatever senators are involved in whatever committees are out, they should take the deal. They should say, okay, cool, Republicans, for the next 12 months until after the election, we will shut that border down. We're going to declare an emergency. We will close it. We will deport the people who have not yet been processed unless they clearly have a refugee issue. Because, an awful lot of these people are not actually legitimate refugees. They're wannabe immigrants. And, we'll do what you want. And what would that do? That would take this issue off the table. This will be the main issue. Immigration is going to be the main issue that Republicans are going to try to use in 2024 to beat up on Joe Biden and on Democrats all across the country. Let's just take that weapon away from them. Let's just say, cool, we'll do it. Now, that would require working out a deal that's not completely crazy, but it can be offensive to Democrats. And I realize that there's a lot of Democrats, and maybe you're going to call and tell me this yourself. But what happened to compassion? But wait a minute, we got to do, these are real people, their lives are, I get it.